Hello, everyone. Tilly here. I wanted to hop on and give everyone an official update about the channel, the future of it, the future of my career out in the public eye, and explain some things that have been transpiring, which you may not know about. Because, quite frankly, I don't talk too much about some of the more personal details of my life unless I find them highly relevant to the material on my channel, in my books, and related to public appearances coming up and the future of all of that. With this being said, you may have noticed that after February going into March, the core content on my channel essentially dropped off. I wasn't making episodes where it was me talking about paranormal activity or anything of the sort. It was just me interviewing other people. And this is because, well, firstly, we had a massive move coming. We moved to this beautiful place out in the country, essentially, and I'm very happy here. I love it. I hope that we're going to be able to have this small home base here for quite a while. That's how fond I am of it. We have peacocks that live next door. They scream in the background pretty regularly, and it's wonderful here. The sky is clear and bright at night, so we get to have campfires pretty often. It's just delightful. Lots of trees, lots of birds, lots of bugs. It's just wonderful, in my opinion. So we had that move at the end of March, but another thing that happened at the end of March, funnily enough, right during the move of our weekend, over Easter weekend, I had a terrifyingly dangerous medical event, and it is related to my extremely rare genetic profile. So there was not a lot that I could do to prevent it based on several factors that were going on within my body, genetically at the cellular level, but then also due to, unfortunately, doctor ignorance and my own lack of deep medical training on rare genetic differences. Long story short, I, one evening in the middle of this move, started having bizarre symptoms. My heart started racing, seemingly for no reason, and I couldn't think well. I wasn't able to think logically, which was very alarming and very strange for me. And then I was having some trouble walking and seeing properly. I was getting tunnel vision, and all of that accumulated into me having to call for an ambulance. And please forgive me, I'm still recovering, and I still have some issues with brain fog and with language and processing. I know that the work that I've put out since coming from the hospital isn't my best. That should get better over time as I'm able to speak and process more clearly. Well, I was rushed to the emergency room and they ran a ton of tests on me. They wound up having to put me on IV medication to slow my brain down, as well as my heart rate, because my heart rate was well over 140 at that point, and I was having problems with blood pressure being too low. Well, after they were able to stabilize me for overnight, they sent me to a hospital. I was admitted to the hospital for a while for further monitoring, and I came home. I'm stable now. I'm pretty good now for the most part, but I still had resurgences of the symptoms for, I want to say, like the last 3 weeks. The test results had found abnormally high amounts of the thyroid, I think it's a hormone, T4, in my blood, so free floating, and that causes nervous system agitation, which for someone with my genetic profile is very dangerous, because my heart, my nervous system, everything is already hyper connected, and I can't risk very much that excites my nervous system too much. So that was very dangerous. And I was fortunate to be admitted into the emergency room under an emergency doctor who specializes in rare conditions, genetic differences, all of that good stuff. And she taught me a great deal about how my nervous system behaves. I'm very grateful for that. I've been working with genetic specialists for several years now, but genetic specialists, they're not cardiologists, they're not thyroid experts or endocrinologists, all of that. And finding the proper care has been incredibly difficult for my whole life. For a bit of backstory, I was born with what I understand to be the rarest type of porphyria. Porphyria is a group of genetic differences. You could say that they're genetic mutations or genetic diseases, however you'd like to frame it. Genetic disability, even. It involves the liver and blood production, heme production, and all porphyrias have in common that they are activated by sunlight. So I'm 32, and my entire life, at least growing up and then into my 20s, people didn't really believe me when I would say things like that the sunlight hurt my skin, it burned, and they wouldn't take me seriously when I would complain of other symptoms such as stomach pain, rageful hunger, and that I was feeling confused and disoriented, having trouble thinking, and when I was exposed to sunlight. That was until in my childhood I started around toddlerhood showing signs of a porphyria episode. So my skin, I don't have the blistering type. Mine is only activated by sunlight, and my porphyria manifests in my eyes going bloodshot. So I'm told that I look like a demon. I have problems thinking, get ragefully angry and hungry. My skin would turn red and swell, sometimes to like double the normal size. trouble thinking, trouble rationalizing, like being present and logical. I just not myself. And then urine turning dark red, turning dark brown is another typical sign that I had. And then exhaustion and trouble breathing. So very dangerous. Growing up, this was in the early 1990s. Doctors didn't take what I would say seriously, just like my parents. And so they attributed my symptoms to having to be something else. I grew up having to protect myself from the sun as much as possible. And, people calling me a hypochondriac and whatnot, not good. I don't recommend it. I also have a type of genetic diabetes. Most people think that diabetes, there's just type 1 and type 2. But if I'm remembering properly, there are actually 7 different types. And I think it's 5. There are 5 type of genetic diabetes. They're just a lot less common. My body doesn't process carbs or sugar almost at all. And so I'm also contending with some pretty significant malnutrition issues that I've had since childhood because I can't eat most food. My body only processes rare beef, like rare steak and salmon and eggs, heavy cream and butter. But I have to rely on a diet heavy in rare steak and rare beef the vast majority of the time because my body needs the heme content, or you could say the blood content in that meat. Without that, I would surely die because of the type of porphyria that I have. Um, so all of that being said, I'm grateful to even be here. People with my genetic differences, from what I've been told by specialists, typically only survive to be between 30 and 40 years old. Most of the deaths occur between 35 and 40. And that's the best statistics that we have right now in the modern age for people like me, because my genetic profile is very rare. After getting out of the hospital, though, I had some really awesome news. I came across a brand new genetic cellular treatment, therapy, medication, medicine, all in one. This therapy is extremely controversial and it's brand new. It was only conceived of about, I think, 20 years ago from what I remember reading, if I'm remembering properly, but please forgive me for that. And it only became available to the public about 5 years ago. It was not initially planned to be used to treat any of the types of porphyria. However, it was approved to be used for all types of diabetes except for type 1 and type 1.5, 1.5, if I'm remembering properly. So those two can't use this therapy, but the rest can. I started taking the therapy after I got out of the hospital, and it is amazing. It seems to be working perfectly well, and it's probably saving my life. It's allowing me to expand my diet and to take higher doses of certain nutrients that I need in pill form or essence form so that my body can process them appropriately. It also has had the incredible, unexpected effect of putting my sunlight activated illness and all of the organ damage that comes with that into remission. So I had gotten to the point over the last several years that I couldn't even spend 2 minutes exposed to sun because all of the symptoms that I mentioned earlier would occur, and they were just getting to the point where it was immediately life-threatening. Well, the way that this new therapy works, it acts on the liver and certain pathways within the body that correspond with liver function, heme production, and what did they say? Please forgive me. And the processing of toxins and free radicals in the body, and that includes sunlight, because sunlight can be very strong to the tissues. It can be damaging, incredibly damaging, even for people without porphyria. So I decided to test the therapy, and I started exposing myself a little bit to sunlight over the last week and a half or so. I'm not having any symptoms anymore. It's incredible. Right now, I'm sitting out, and occasionally some sunlight is hitting my skin, and I have no reaction. I've experienced nothing. And this has never been the case for me as far back as I can remember. There was always some kind of reaction associated with the sunlight for me, a very negative reaction. Over the past few days, even, as I have been taking this therapy, I've been purposefully exposing myself to sunlight for longer periods of time. No reaction. And for me, that's huge. I've always wanted to be able to go out into the sunlight with other people and be just fine. It's never happened. And I'm very grateful. I'm deeply grateful. Excuse me. I don't know that it is ever going to correct the genetic reason for my porphyria, but if this therapy can change the cellular workings, my organ workings, my blood, to allow me to be in the sunlight and to get better nutrition, I'm all for it. I think that is, for me, good enough. And then outside of this too, I discovered that I have a severe, I don't know, maybe allergy is the right word, but I can't, my body also doesn't process oxalates. If you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you to look that up, because I'm not sure that there's enough time for me to explain all of what that is. So it's just been one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And I've been trying to pull everything together enough so that I can return to making YouTube content like what I was before. I miss making those types of episodes. I've had people email me, ask me why I'm not making them anymore. And now you know. The other big factor in my changing of the YouTube channel content was that my nervous system was constantly on fire because we lived in a haunted house, and I didn't know that there was a haunting dormant within that house until I want to say like the day after we had officially started moving our stuff out. There was a neighbor who filled us in on some really interesting details, and it put a lot of pieces together for me. This house, I think, needs to be condemned. The first year and a half that we lived there, everything was fine. But that started to change when we started getting black mold in the house that we didn't understand where it was coming from because we hadn't damaged the house. Well, there was that, and then we discovered after moving out that there had not only been a few deaths in the house, but that the landlords were pretty awful landlords. They were neglecting a lot of the core care of that house, and then it made sense to me why we had the kind of haunting that we did. The beings, the creatures that were haunting the house were part of a, what I call personally, decay claim haunting. What this means is that the house was so broken down at the foundational elements of it that wild, non-human, non-sentient creatures, for lack of a better word, were moving into the house to attempt to take it by force. Decay claim hauntings are typically very rare, especially here in the United States, because we have some rather strict rules and laws around how someone can rent out a house. If you're not familiar, here in Florida, the laws are a lot more lax than in other parts of the United States, though. And in doing research after we left, we realized that the landlords were using these loopholes to rent out this unfit house. And I think it's a shame because I really loved that house. It was such a cute little cottage. We wanted to stay there for several more years, but there came a point where we discovered that the foundation of the house was cracked and it was causing severe water damage in the half of the house that was haunted. On that half of the house, there was also the black mold issue, and then there was another spot starting in the front of the house. The roof was messed up. We didn't find out about that until we were moving out. The electricity was also messed up, and the haunting was just spreading all throughout as the damage was. So it was an awful situation, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, truly. When these things started happening and ramping up, I would try to talk to these non-human visitors. I tried everything that I have in my book that worked in years past. Nothing. They just got more vicious. And I, for quite a while, thought that maybe I was doing something wrong. But when I discovered all of the damage to the house, it made perfect sense to me that I was dealing with NPCs, non-player characters, essentially. So these were not sentient beings. They were not sentient, non-human people or anything. They don't communicate in language. They don't have any type of sympathy or empathy. They speak in violence and intimidation, and that's it. And the month before we moved out, I was attacked. And I didn't talk about this much just because I didn't know, like, would anyone care about my personal drama? I don't know. But I don't like to talk about all of this because I don't want to bore people, typically speaking, anyway. But we had moved all of our bedroom necessities out of the room, which was the center of the haunting, along with the attached bathroom and the attached closet, that whole half of the house. We moved into the living room. It was just box spring and mattress in the corner of the living room, across the doorway from the haunted part of the house, because we had nowhere else to put it in this small house. And the first or second night that we had moved out, this creature had attacked me in bed, sexually seeming to attack me, and messed with the electricity. My husband didn't see the attack on me, even though he was laying next to me. He was asleep at that point. But when I started struggling and woke him up, he did see what was going on with the electricity. And the electricity stayed messed up in that part of the house until the day before we left. And we at that point already had all of our stuff moved out and whatnot. So just very interesting. If they wanted us to leave, which I strongly suggest they did that, or they wanted to seriously hurt us, they accomplished that. We found out, though, from the neighbor, like the next day, that no one had ever stayed in that house longer than their 1-year contract with the landlord. We were the longest remaining tenants since the older gentleman who originally had owned that house. He passed away in that house several years ago. We were the longest staying tenants. And we found out about severe roof damage that had been neglected by the landlords and a multitude of other things. So it makes sense. You may like to hear about what I regard as my near-death experience, too, when I was going through the ringer the last weekend of March this year. So I was in the midst of those symptoms I described: the racing heart, the tunnel vision, and confusion, and on and on. When I was able to meet with the EMS team, I had stepped outside and I was talking with them on the front patio. And they had the pressure cuff on me and checked my blood sugar, everything. They said that my blood pressure was too low and that I should be sitting down because otherwise I could get very hurt. I felt okay, strangely, standing up though. So I stood up for as long as I could. And then I did at some point need to sit down because I really was not doing well. In talking to the paramedic lead, I was sitting down, leaning back against the house, and the tunnel vision started to turn into, well, DMT, psychedelic patterns, is really the only thing that I can think to compare it to. And then when I would close my eyes, whether it was to blink or try to rest a little bit, at one point I felt like I had been launched into another realm. And the patterns that I was seeing gave way to being surrounded in a black void with tons of eyes watching me. And I could make out just like a few non-human faces, and they were all watching me. And I got the sense from them that they were very curious about what I was going to do, where I was going to go. Sorry for that, airplane. And some of them seemed to be trying to point me in a direction, and it seemed like some of them were trying to communicate with me, but I couldn't hear them or understand what they were trying to get at. It was interesting. There was like a deafening silence there, but it was punctuated with me hearing the paramedic lead and trying to answer his questions. And then I felt like I was being spun around, like I was being rouletted, is how I like to describe it. And then I was back in quote unquote my body, which I'll explain in just a moment. And the EMS lead said that I needed to go immediately to the hospital. Fast forward through everything I already explained, the boring parts of the hospital, perhaps. I came home, and on the day that I was able to eat my proper food, I realized that I was missing a whole tooth. So I think everyone knows what wisdom teeth are at this point. I had a wisdom tooth from like 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. It grew in, and it grew in crooked back here. So it was crowding another tooth, and it was horrible. Meat would get stuck in it all the time, and it took me a stupid long time to floss properly after I would eat. And of course, I'm eating like every day. Hated it. It was horrible. After I came home from the hospital and ate, I realized that I didn't have to floss back there like that, and I couldn't figure out why until I got in front of the mirror. I pried my mouth open. I was touching it with my fingers. I was touching it with the floss pick, and I was just trying to figure out, why is this suddenly feeling so different? I soon discovered that there was no more troublesome wisdom tooth there at all. Just nicely spaced, regular old wisdom teeth. Molars. I was shocked. I came back to this body, or no, I came back to this timeline, or this set of timelines. I came back to this lifetime completely missing a tooth. And so after that, I gave myself some existential therapy as though I were one of my own clients back in the day. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm really happy to be here. I think that this timeline is pretty awesome. I'm missing that troublesome tooth. I'm booked for a national UFO paranormal disclosure conference coming up in the autumn. I've just signed a brand new book deal for an original fictional paranormal short story collection. I'm smack in the middle of writing that right now and working with an illustrator and my publishing house for that, which is Zontar Press. If you're not familiar, it is run by Tim R. Swartz, and that's my buddy. I love him to pieces. He's been so incredibly wonderful to me. Please do support that. Oh, and then myself and Tim and a bunch of our friends and colleagues have a brand new Weird Time book coming out by next month. So I think that's amazing as well. I have other projects in the works as well, and for the most part, things seem to be going pretty swimmingly here. I really can't complain. So I love this timeline. I love being here, and now I have a solution to the problems that my genetics pose in living here. And I hope that I'm going to be here for a good long while. I just in case I'm not, because there is always the chance that you could come back to this channel and there is a video from my husband explaining that I passed away. So in case that happens, I wanted to take some time to talk about the different ways that people can incarnate here, the different challenges that can be had, and the seriousness of it. I think back to when I was a little girl and no one believed me. They didn't believe me that I was seeing, for example, fairies or the Mandela effect around me. They didn't believe me about the sunlight. They didn't believe me about the food. And the best that they did for me was to take me to the doctor and find out what allergy that I had, for example, with that. And then there are the psychological differences. They noticed, for example, my parents noticed when I was around 4 or 5 years old that I spoke differently, I think differently. And they took me to doctors and therapists. And I was diagnosed at a very young age as having very low ego content and very low emotional content. They kind of chalked it up to being a general autism diagnosis, but because I don't fit any of the categories well enough, they kind of had to leave it at that. I'm all right with that. So I am grateful. I've been in like a social integration type of therapy all my life. I still go occasionally, even now, to help me communicate better with the people around me, to help me understand how other people think, because it doesn't come naturally to me. And in fact, I would say it is 100% foreign to me. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't seem to make sense to other people. So I still am in that type of integration therapy, and I probably will be for the rest of my life, because I think that learning is a journey. And I think that I'm always going to have something to learn about human nature or human psychology and how to get along in this world. I have now a fantastic team of people behind me who seem to grasp how I think, and they're not frightened by me when I'm not putting on a show, because when I agreed to do this project with Tim Swartz and the team that supports me on the back end, I agreed that I would do everything that I could to be as honest and forthcoming and understanding as I possibly could be without risking my safety. And so to do that, I need to have a ton of support. And I'm very happy that I have that. I think that what I'm doing is important work, because if humankind can broaden its horizons and its ideas of what makes a good person, you could say, I think that more of the incarnate family branches would be a lot more willing to interact, to be more honest. And I think that there would be a lot more love and growth in the world. And I think that starts on the inside and moves outwards towards the rest of society. And then I think that also, after a certain point, affects other timelines and other dimensions. Because I think that we're all connected. That is my theory. Anyway, but long story short, it's hard. It is hard right now doing all of this and trying to recover, but also being more in the public eye, interacting with people, being understanding and loving in the way that when I interact with people, I put on the best show that I can for them, presenting as happy and positive and emoting as I can. Because if you were just to see me in my natural state, I'm very flat, and I don't experience a lot of emotions, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just different, and a lot of people react negatively to that because they think that I kind of fit into that uncanny valley type of category, and I've had people tell me that they're set off by me in a negative way, and that I'm not upset. I don't blame them one bit. I look a little funny. I act funny. I kind of speak funny. I'm not for everyone. And regardless of that, I still do my best to be as honest, kind, loving, accurate, understanding, encouraging as I possibly can be. And this is the example that I want to set for the rest of the world. Even though within my own self, I don't run on emotions, I run on creativity and logic, several types of different logic. And for people, that is unsettling, and that's okay. But this is where I'm coming from. That's where I've been lately. That's how it affects the YouTube channel for the most part. Given my health status right now physically, I'm not able to do the merchandise shop that I wanted to set up and that I was working on diligently. I'm also not going to be able to do a lot of in real life walks for a while. I've also been told that I can't do too much film work. So the core content episodes, I can't do a lot of that until probably December. It could be earlier, it could be later. It just depends on my health, really. So I'm filling the channel right now with some pretty cool interviews that I have coming up. I have the rest of April booked, and then I have May, June, and most of July booked as well. And so that is kind of going to be the core content until I either get clearance to start producing those other episodes, which I miss that. I want to do that. I'm hoping that I get at least some general clearance to start making that content again in general. But when I do, I'm probably going to only be able to put out 1 or 2 episodes a month. And outside of that, I'm going to be returning to writing for the International Dogman Project, both the America group and the European group, and working still on my book. I'm hoping that that'll be out by October 1st, and hopefully going to this convention. And if that goes well, if my nervous system handles that well, I'm going to do other engagements, other conventions too. I think that covers it. It's been a long journey for me, and interestingly, when I was very ill last spring, I had what I believe to be another near-death experience, and the person who came to get me gave me the choice to vacate this lifetime and go elsewhere where I'd be more suited, or to stay and tolerate another essentially year of hell, but that by April of 2024, I would be, the end of April, I should say, the end of April of 2024, I would be just fine. And I decided to stay because I had that reassurance. I had that hope. And I am delighted to see that it seems to have come true. I am in awe of what I perceive to be the beauty and the adventure of existence. Wasn't it a character in Jurassic Park that said life finds a way?